to the What Really Happened radio show. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, April 7th, 2016. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We have lots of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. Somebody's already calling in, I can see. And Tom, as usual, is in our control room, handling the phone lines and putting you on the air with your various comments and questions. Getting right into it, of course, the political campaigning is now getting intense. Hillary is starting to realize that she is losing ground in the popular vote to Bernie Sanders. All of her scandals are coming up all over social media, unanswered questions about possible espionage while Secretary of State. The public is aware there are at least 4 crimes we know she committed. The evidence is indisputable. And if the government chooses to do nothing about it, it's going to look like a cover-up, and that is not going to sit well with the voters either. Now, following the Wisconsin upset, the Sanders campaign has come on out saying that the Clinton campaign seems to have adopted a new strategy. Just ignore the base and just go on the attack on Sanders. So Hillary's campaign against Sanders is going negative. They're going to try and say he's not qualified to be president. He's certainly far more qualified than Hillary is. There's absolutely no question about that. Now, I want to go back to something that happened during the first Democratic debate where Bernie Sanders dismissed the email scandal. I'm sick and tired of hearing about the email scandal. Everybody cheered and clapped and hurrahed, and it appeared he was taking the moral high ground. But now that the campaign is swinging negative, I think the time has come to acknowledge that Sanders was a bit hasty to dismiss the scandal out of hand, because this is the issue that could put him in the nomination. Now, remember, back in 1996, President Bill Clinton was running for re-election, and he authorized the transfer of some sensitive U.S. technology to China over the objections of the Pentagon, various intelligence agencies, and all of a sudden money began pouring into his re-election campaign from Chinese-American citizens who didn't seem to have that much money to give. And after a little digging, it came out this money was coming in from Asia, from China, from Chinese intelligence. It was being given to these Chinese-American citizens so they could get around the law that says candidates cannot take foreign donations, and it poured into Bill Clinton's re-election campaign. The scandal was called Chinagate. He probably should have been impeached then. But it's relevant today because of the email server scandal. Hillary had this private email server with weaker security than Ashley Madison, on which were parked some of the nation's most closely guarded secrets. Some of them had to be carried over and put on that server with a flash drive because they originated on isolated networks that do not connect with the outside internet. So it is reasonable to ask if Hillary was selling these secrets to other countries and using her charitable foundation to accept and launder the payments. And a lot of foreign money came into that foundation. And those governments making those donations got favorable treatment at the State Department, and maybe they got something else. And this is a reasonable question to ask. I'm going to go on asking it. And it's a question nobody in government seems to want to go near, even to ridicule and dismiss the idea. They don't want to touch it. So we're going to go ahead and grab ourselves a phone call. Scott in Vermont, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. You know, last week on All In with Chris Hayes, he was talking about the investigation into Hillary. And you know what the topic of the segment was? It was that there isn't 147 FBI agents assigned to Hillary's email case. There's only 12, so we should feel much better about that, because only having 12 FBI agents investigating you is not that bad. I could not believe
Actually,
it.
if I had one FBI agent investigating me, I'd be sweating right about now here. I don't know where that 147 number came from, okay? But it doesn't take 147. It doesn't even take 12. I mean, we have got that one email in which Hillary instructed a subordinate to strip the classification headings off a document and send it non-secure. That's a felony violation of Title 18 right now. And under Title 18, you are banned from holding public office if you violate Title 18. I mean, under the letter of the law, Hillary should already be out. And I hate to say I told you so, but I'm getting the sinking feeling that the FBI is going to thrash around a lot, try and look impressive and say, well, we didn't really find anything all that nasty. And Loretta Lynch is going to say, well, see, it was a tempest in a teacup, and they're just going to write it all off. But the American people should view this as just another in a long series of cover-ups of the crimes of the Clinton cartel.
Well, I hope it sinks here, but what I was actually calling about, just two quick points. When I talked to friends of mine that are liberal, and I mentioned that if Hillary gets the nomination, she runs against Trump, that I still feel a lot of Bernie supporters are still going to write in his name. That infuriates them when I say that.
Mm-hmm.
And I bet you a good 1% to 2% of Bernie supporters are not going to support Hillary, and they're going to write his name in, and that could cost her. I
have heard as much as 25% are going to,
really?
but 25% are not going to support Hillary. The problem is, in this era of electronic voting, okay, there's a special paper form for a write-in ballot, and all they need to do at all the various polling places across the nation is simply not have a huge supply of those. You know, we only had 3 of these things. We weren't expecting all these Sanders voters to write them in and everything. You know.
Oh, wow. Well, the other thing I wanted to ask you about is once the two parties nominate their person, do you think that any false flag that happens in the U.S. and Europe, since I'm guessing it would hurt Hillary's chances, and she's the establishment candidate, and assuming Trump is the GOP nominee, do you think that once the conventions are over, that we'll have a period that will be free of terrorism because they won't want to hurt Hillary's chances of beating Trump?
That's a possibility, but again, you shouldn't be viewing the government and the political system as a single monolith under a single direction. It's badly factionalized, and everybody's doing what they're doing in their own interests, often at odds with each other. That's why we have terrorists backed by the Pentagon fighting against terrorists backed by the CIA in Syria right now. Now, because of Wisconsin, at this point, I don't think it's safe to assume Donald Trump is going to be the GOP nominee unless he sweeps every single state in the rest of the primaries, and we're already seeing, massive election fraud. I mean, the We Hate Donald Trump network. I mean, they're running all these things on the under banner, that Trump's unfavorable rating soars. I mean, they're just pounding this thing as hard as they can. And again, if Trump looks like he's going to get close to the nomination, they could do the Robert Kennedy approach on him. And I hate to say that. It looks to me like we're going to have Hillary is going to get the Democratic nomination, and the GOP nomination is still in play. They're trying to get Trump out. They're trying to put somebody else in. Cruz walks in with a liability. Hillary Clinton will not hesitate to point out that he is Canadian by birth. His birth certificate is Canadian. His mother was a Canadian citizen when she bore him, and he certainly was not born on the native soil of the United States, as required by the Constitution. So, I think they're getting ready to throw a ringer in there, and it looks like it's going to be Paul Ryan.
Is that what you're thinking, Paul Ryan?
Well, it's already been announced they're going to try and do that. Now, I've been saying over this last week, looking at Paul Ryan over in Israel, kissing Netanyahu's gluteus maximi, that it looked like Ryan was getting ready to throw his hat in the ring, and now we've got some confirmation we're going to be mentioning a little bit later in the show. Anyway, Scott, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And the corporate media is basically announcing the beginning of the attack phase of the Sanders versus Clinton campaign, and Hillary's definitely going negative. Hillary came out on the attack against Sanders, saying that he should apologize to all the families of the victims in Sandy Hook because he refused to allow gun makers to be sued for the crimes committed with their guns, which is kind of like suing automakers when somebody gets into an accident. or deliberately runs up on the sidewalk and kills people. It's a nonsensical situation, but it's part of the gun grabber agenda. Sanders came back and said that Hillary Clinton should apologize to all the victims of the Iraq War, and there are a lot more of those, because she voted in favor of that war. Now, one of Hillary's biggest attacks against Sanders is that he is very socialist, and he wants to raise taxes in order to be able to spend more on the country. And a lot of Americans are feeling overtaxed right now, and that was working against Sanders. But the Panama Papers have changed that, with the revelation that the ultra-rich in this country aren't actually paying their fair share. And so now a lot of people are swinging over to Bernie Sanders' camp and say, yeah, we can give tax and spend a chance, we just have to tax the people with the money. And so he's getting a boost from that. And Sanders is not hesitating to remind everybody about how Obama and Hillary lobbied for the passage of this Bush-era free trade bill with Panama that opened the door to all of these shenanigans. And Bernie Sanders, got up there in Congress and said this is a bad idea because it's going to allow the super rich to avoid paying their taxes. So, all right, let's go ahead and grab a couple of phone calls. We're going to talk to Rick in Canada. Aloha, Rick. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how's it going, Mike? Just a quick story for listeners. I lived in Prague just after communism fell, son of missionaries, and it was a pretty messed up place. Like, it was just coming out of, transferring from one government to the other. But I didn't speak Czech. This was back when it was Czechoslovakia. So I went to an American embassy school. I was totally an outsider. All these kids were, sons and daughters of ambassadors and stuff like that. But this was around the time that Serbia and Croatia were at war, and also around the time that Desert Storm started. In my class, behind me, were a Serbian and Croatian kid, and they were the best of friends. And in front of me was the son of the Kuwaiti ambassador and Saddam Hussein's niece, and they were the best of friends. That goes to show you that, all this wars and deceptions, they belong to greedy people that manipulate and screw with people. And they always said that this wasn't their problem, that it was people coming in and messing with their countries and stuff like that. It was pretty interesting to get that inside look for a couple of years.
Most people left to themselves tend to be altruistic, friendly, gregarious. It's only these self-anointed leaders who stir up trouble, who create fear, who have false flag terror trying to turn people against each other to build to that case of war and conquest. And if that entire class of sociopathic personalities were to vanish from the face of planet Earth, I think humankind would definitely improve. Civilization would definitely improve. The very best government is the one that is very tiny and is deliberately hamstrung and limited. That's the way the United States was originally set up, because all the systems, whether it's capitalism or socialism or any of it, those systems are only going to be as good as the people who are put in control of them. And the greater the degree of control and power, the greater the degree of corruption. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. That is a very true statement. And that's why the Founding Fathers created our government originally with 3 equal branches keeping an eye on each other for shenanigans, and most of the power reserved to the states and the people. We've lost that brilliant gift, and we need to get back to it.
Yeah, and under the TPP, if you've read through it, it says in the TPP countries that are signed on, the primary government, the federal government, the national government reigns supreme over all other governments. So in Canada, it'd be federal over provincial, and this is cemented in the TPP when the countries sign on to it. So corporations, companies, whatever, they only have to, I guess, lobby or corrupt one branch of government.
Yeah, that's basically it. That's exactly what it is. This is the rise of the corporatocracy. And by the way, corporatocracy is another word for fascism. This is the money junkies plundering the planet for their own, sense of glory and self-importance. If you look at your average money junkie, these are people who don't have anything else going for them. Their entire sense of self-valuation is how much they can take away from other people without giving anything back. And I do want to draw that big black line between the true sociopathic money junkie and people who get rich the good old-fashioned way by coming up with products and services or entertainments that we voluntarily trade our money for. Though that's a separate category of people. Steve Jobs and the Apple computer. George Lucas and all of his wonderful movies. James Cameron and all of his wonderful movies. I mean, these are people who are doing it the way that is a benefit to society. And yes, they're getting rich, and everybody applauds them. That's the way it should be done. It's these scammers like the Bernie Madoffs that are the ones that have to really be removed from control over our lives.
Yep. One last thing for your viewers. When people think of communism, they often think of, it's boots on the head, all this kind of stuff. Communism, technically, or oppression, it's not just communism. It's an oppressive government. It doesn't look like being oppressed all the time. It's just a constant grind. There's little to no selection. The infrastructure is fading away.
Well, we've got that here already, in our, and again, most of what people think they knew about communism under the Soviet Union was what we were being taught in the schools, which all turned out to be a lot of nonsense. Which I learned growing up when I finally met people from the Soviet Union, and again, it's just more of that demonization. We're good, they're bad. That's why you must always be loyal to us. And every government tells their people the same lie. Anyway, listen, I need to let you go. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to grab Matt in Colorado, and I'm probably going to have to take you through the commercial break, but what's on your mind?
Yeah, hey, Michael. Thanks for taking my call. What I was interested in today is the Panama Papers, and I'm wondering why there needs to be a tax haven for anybody that that's an elite and they're part of the
Well, from the point of view of the ordinary taxpayers of a nation, there doesn't need to be one, but the ultra-rich wanted one, so it was legislated in. And ordinary people like you and I, we don't have the money to take advantage of these loopholes and fill out all these shell companies. They basically legalized tax avoidance, and then that's what they got caught doing.
Yeah, but so like a lot of them are foreign nationals, and they're also high up in countries that print their own currency and they're not part of the Federal Reserve, although Saudi Arabia and so forth is obviously on the petrodollar. But if you're looking at it, why would you ever put your money in, if you're a foreign national and they're accusing Vladimir Putin and others of like putting money into a bank in the Caribbean? It's so ludicrous. Why would they do that?
Well, because, they put the money into these countries where the laws make it easy to hide. And I'm going to respond to your question when we come back from the break here. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And basically, this is in answer to that last phone call. The issue is that countries love to have foreigners put money in their banks because it becomes part of their asset base. They're not just locking that money up in a closet somewhere. They're able to make loans with it, investments with it, earn returns and revenues, part of which is shared with the original owner of that money, just like banking is supposed to go on. But different countries have different reporting rules. Now, for a long time, Switzerland was almost legendary for the incredible secrecy of its banks. And that secrecy was a shield where people who had Swiss bank accounts were generally safe from their own governments finding out what assets they had. Now, it's kind of interesting that leading up to this whole Panama Papers scandal, the U.S. government succeeded in putting pressure on Switzerland to change their reporting rules so that American citizens with accounts in Swiss banks, the Swiss banks would send that information back to the Internal Revenue Service. So this is a constantly changing situation where different governments, different countries have different reporting rules. And they know that the less reporting they do, the more likely they're going to have money pouring into their banks from foreign sources. That's why you put your money in a foreign bank, so that it is as invisible as possible to your own government. And to get around the reporting that is going on, you use shell companies. Sometimes they can be nested 5 and 6 deep to make it very, very difficult to track who really owns what. And all of this is within a framework of laws that make this legal, and obviously it's not something that ordinary people can take advantage of. It is a system that has been created for the world's ultra-rich to get off of paying taxes and dump the tax burden back on you. And it includes members of all these governments, along with various celebrities and athletes and anybody with money. Anybody above a certain level of income can play these games and pay very little, if any, tax whatsoever. Now then, apparently more and more links are starting to show up between this Panama Papers scandal and Hillary Clinton. And apparently some of the documents leaked from that law firm in Panama, Mossack Fonseca, are showing how various companies were interlinked. And apparently one of a Clinton-linked lobbying groups was lobbying for one of the banks that is involved in this scandal. And the three lobbyists working on the account was Tony Podesta, who's a bundler for the Clinton campaign, and the brother of campaign chairman John Podesta, who co-founded the firm, and it just goes on and on and on. Now, there's another article that just came out over at KawhiLapelWordPress.com, and they're starting to put together all these independent incidents to see the pattern of corruption that's going on. Now, Hillary Clinton lobbied for the Panama United States Promotion Agreement. That's the law that made all this stuff legal. And she was warned by many people, including Bernie Sanders, it would make money laundering and tax evasion easier for rich people and bad guys. This has been reported in IBTimes.com and a lot of other places. Now, Deutsche Bank is up to their eyeballs in this scandal. Now, after resigning as Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton personally made $485,000 for a speech to Deutsche Bank. This was reported over at The Intercept. So you see how it works. Hillary Clinton did Deutsche Bank a big, lucrative favor, and once it was legal, they paid her back with this speaking fee. And that's why all these paid speeches are important. Nobody really thinks the wisdom of Hillary Clinton is worth $200,000-$300,000. This is all paybacks for favors she did for them. And it's tied in with this scandal. By the way, the Clinton Foundation, the Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation, received $81 million in donations from the Swiss bank HSBC, which is also up to its neck in this whole money laundering Panama Papers situation. Let's grab a phone call. John in Barbados. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Continuing with the Panama Papers, there's inference that George Soros was involved with this release. If so, I would be very nervous if I was George Soros, because it's inconvenienced and jeopardized a lot of very rich and very powerful people.
Well, let's back up here a little bit, okay? Because everybody's jumping to a conclusion that Soros orchestrated this, and I don't know that that's actually been documented. The link to Soros is that his foundation is one of the financial supporters of this international consortium of investigative journalists that has been working on this story for a year. We don't know how much editorial control that gives him. Okay, and we don't know if he actively went in there. Most of the bias and spin on this story seems to be coming out of the corporate media itself. The attempt to bash Putin with it, the reluctance to mention the links to American ultra-rich people. But we don't know for a fact that Soros engineered this. We still don't know the identity of the person who leaked this information from this Panamanian law firm. The Panamanian law firm is now saying it was an outside hack from somebody in Europe. That's the latest update on that. Now, if Soros, in point of fact, was putting this out there to cause damage to Vladimir Putin and to Bashar al-Assad, it has backflashed horribly, and it's hit David Cameron, it's hit Kofi Annan's son, it's hitting Hillary Clinton, it's hitting all these people that probably Soros did not intend. But you're absolutely right. If it comes out that Soros engineered this, he has angered some people who know very well how to kill people who anger them.
Yes, well, I would be, as you say many times, staying away from small aeroplanes and public places if I was George Soros.
My understanding is George Soros has a very big plane that he flies around in.
Probably. Looking at it, though, this is just a tip of the iceberg. We haven't even gone into the Cayman Islands, where we know that Mitt Romney has his money stashed away.
Yep.
And Bermuda and British Virgin Islands. These all were part of the old, apart from Panama, of course, the old British Empire. And anybody who thinks that this huge amount of money that the British Empire robbed from everybody around the world has disappeared have got to be, they need some serious psychiatric treatment, because this city of London still provides the enormous capital, this finance capital that goes around the world to finance these various projects. And they are, the London gold market sets the gold price.
Yeah, but they've been caught rigging it too. So, their star is on the wane. Their influence is definitely... We're seeing a tectonic shift in who controls the world's economy, and that's why the U.S. is making plans to have war on Russia and China, is they want to preserve the old order and the old system, and it's slipping away from them. It's not being taken away. It's not being stolen from them. They've mismanaged it so badly and so corruptly that people are just walking away from that U.S.-centric, London-centric global financial order, and that's really what's going on. Anyway...
Well, I remember that Wolf Blitzer of CNN made a faux pas when he suggested that actually it was LIBOR and Libra that set the mortgage rate for America.
Well, LIBOR certainly did, but not Libra. Anyway, John, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to grab a phone call here from Mateus up in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What is on your mind?
Hey, Michael. I have a question and insight I'd like your feedback on. First question is, how does it feel to be on the right side of history?
I wasn't aware that I actually was.
Well, think about it. That's the good news for all of us in this fight, is that we're on the right side of history here.
I think I'm going to leave that up to the historians to decide here. And I'm not really interested in what future historians think about me, because I have the sneaking suspicion I won't be reading history books then anyway. So, now I think that's an oversimplification. Right side of history, wrong side of history, given how much of our history is itself a hoax.
Well, like the founding fathers talking about the animating contest of liberty burning in their belly, they're on the right side of history. And then the tyrants trying to crush them down with a boot on their face, they're on the wrong side of history. That's what I mean. Well,
I'm comfortable with the idea that we're on the side of freedom and peace and commerce for all human beings, and we're opposed to corruption and the money junkies. Certainly that's the side I'm on.
Okay, I didn't mean it to be too serious anyway. The insight, okay, now understand I want Trump to win, so don't think I'm Trump bashing. But I have this is a very interesting opportunity for us to have an insight into the mind of the opponent, because we always wonder, how can the other guys ignore the flaws in their leaders? How can they still vote for Hillary and Obama, right? We never understand that. Well, now we have a chance to understand it. So we have Trump totally selling out in a speech to Israel in that convention.
He didn't totally sell out. He was making nice noises, but he was still walking the balanced issue thing. Let me back up here a little bit. First of all, there are a couple of overlapping factors. One is there is, in fact, massive election fraud going on in the United States this election year. So we're not really sure who is voting for who. As far as people who will support a candidate, despite the candidate's flaws, like Hillary Clinton, that's because most politicians run their campaigns as personality cults, where their supporters come to identify with the personality figure, and they want to win just because they want to be on the winning side. And personality cults are very, very dangerous, whether it's Hillary Clinton or Jim Jones or Adolf Hitler. It's a lousy way to pick a leader and run a country, but it does work. Because there is something in our makeup where we want to attach to somebody that we see as a strong or more knowledgeable leader, whether it's the head of a religious cult or whatever. And I think it's a tremendous weakness in the human makeup, but it's very, very real because Stanley Milgram documented that we just have this instinct to blindly obey anybody we see as an authority figure. And maybe in ancient times that served a survival purpose, but right now I see that instinct to blindly obey our leaders in the nuclear age as being a serious threat to the survival of the species.
Right. Like, I still want Trump to win, even though I'm very, very shocked and disappointed. In my opinion, we just agree to disagree. He's shockingly sold out. Like, Netanyahu could have written the speech, in my opinion. But I still want him to win, and I have my reasons. And I'm just saying that's the insight to the mind of the enemy. That's how they put up with things that aren't cool, is because we're doing it right now with Trump. And so I hope we can use this insight to somehow gain an advantage by understanding.
Well, I think you're oversimplifying the situation because the people who are supporting Trump aren't blindly in love with his personality. In fact, he's almost the direct opposite of a personality cult. A lot of people are chuckling at him. Now, his speech to AIPAC was a political necessity in a country that is ruled, by a foreign power. And you don't get to be in any elected office in this country without Israel giving you permission. And Trump had to recognize that. But he was nowhere near as slavishly devoted to Israel as we're seeing in Hillary or Ted Cruz or any of those others. If you compare Trump's speech with those other speeches, he was actually very lukewarm, which is why Israel is definitely... Okay. Anyway, listen.
I never actually listened.
Okay.
I never actually listened to the other speeches, so...
Well, you should, before you start coming on out here and screaming at Trump. I'd like Trump to win. At this point, I think they're going to be successful in kicking him out of the GOP convention. But I don't agree with everything that Trump says. But the system is in bad need of a shake-up, and he's the person to do it. Anyway, we're going to let you go and switch over here to Laura in Kansas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, Michael. I had a question. Had you heard of a German reporter that did an interview? Actually, it's been published in the Washington's blog. But I was listening today to Finance and Liberty on YouTube, and there was a gentleman, Jerry Robinson, who made some valid points. He also put a recording of this gentleman, this German reporter, that was admitting that basically the German reporters that they have been are working with the CIA, and in order to report pro-American articles in the paper and of course anti-Russian articles.
Oh yeah, I mean that story about the German reporter admitting that came out actually weeks ago. That's been around for a while. I mean, the CIA makes an effort to control media anywhere they can. At the end of World War II, following the model that the Nazis had been using in Germany, the CIA launched Operation Mockingbird, which continues to the very day. And the goal of Operation Mockingbird is to make sure that all of the top management and all of the corporate media are CIA assets in order to steer the story. A good example of that would be over at the Washington Post, when Sally Denton and Roger Morris came up with that story about the cocaine smuggling going on in Arkansas and how it involved the Reagan and Bush and Clinton presidencies. Washington Post lawyers fact-checked the story and said their information is solid. This is a valid story, and the managing editor of the Washington Post, who's fellow Skull and Bones alumni, and we know how tight Skull and Bones is with CIA, simply spiked the story. So, all of the top corporate media executives are linked in with CIA somehow, and they extend that around the world. What frustrates them about the independent media is there are too many of us, and we are so small. They can't compromise all of us. Now, they aim at the big ones, but the little tiny operations that are operating on small change found under seat cushions, they can't figure out a way to get in there and take control. So,
Well, what he was saying in that video also is something that I felt the same way with the Panama Papers, that it just seems very odd that, the American corporations or supposed Americans that are listed, that they're not being put out into the public. What is actually is it's the ones that that we as the Washington D.C. Benefits by them having their reputation ruined. Whether it's
that much is very much
China.
Obvious, and that's why a lot of people. May I finish? Because we're almost at the end of the break.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay. That's why a lot of people are saying it's time to dump the raw data and not let the corporate media act as a filter on who the bad guys are or not. Because absolutely, everybody is spinning this to their own particular advantage. Now, WikiLeaks claims they've got the entire raw data, and they're going to start dumping it so that people can look through it all by themselves. And there's no question they were trying to use it to smear Putin and Assad and retroactively justify the killing of Gaddafi, but it's gotten out of their control, and now it's starting to hit people who are supposed to be our friends, like Prime Minister David Cameron and Hillary Clinton and a lot of other people like Kofi. Okay? All right.
Yeah, one other quick thing was that he pointed out, if we supposedly they're able to hide money here now in Nevada and in Wyoming, isn't that just works into the plan that all of a sudden people are going to start moving their money, and where they're going to have their money but here?
Yeah, that's another aspect of this whole situation. Everybody's going to stop using Panama and Switzerland, and they're going to put their ill-gotten gains in tax havens in the United States, because our banks need that extra cash coming in to stay solvent a little bit longer. We'll be back after our top-of-the-hour news and commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. We've got a caller waiting. Before I get to the phone call, though, and following up on what appears to be one of the agendas behind the Panama Papers revelation, and this ties in with the pressure the U.S. brought against the Swiss banks to open up their records to American tax authorities. Now, not too long ago, Bloomberg actually wrote an article that the United States is becoming a tax haven. And that's big business, because the American banks need other hard assets on their balance sheets to stay solvent. And so basically what the U.S. has done, this isn't about tax honesty. This is about taking over a very lucrative underground business. Punch a hole in Switzerland's bank secrecy, blow the whistle on other money laundering centers around the world. At the same time, we find out the U.S. is doing big business, especially in Delaware, Nevada, South Dakota, and Wyoming. They're doing big business with shell corporations and allowing foreign interests to hide their wealth here. That's what's going on. And for those foreigners who are putting their money into America's tax havens, I would like you to rethink that. Because remember what happened when Germany asked for their gold back from the New York Federal Reserve and they got that big stall. Now, it's one thing when you put your money into an American bank that is above board. If it fails, you're covered by the FDIC, meaning the taxpayers. But these hidden shell corporations, they don't have any protections. Your money could vanish inside our collapsing economy overnight. Just something to think about before you take advantage of the new tax haven on planet Earth. All right, let's grab ourselves a couple of phone calls. Aero in the Netherlands, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Thank you for taking my call. I wanted to have it about the American tax haven. When everything fails, like infrastructure, like power lines, then America has enough paper money to heat the homes, or for the poor, for the homeless on the street. You know?
Yeah.
There's enough paper money then.
Well, unfortunately, most of the money isn't paper. It's just bits in a computer, and it's all imaginary. That's it. We're living with a virtual monetary system. It's all make-believe.
No. Do you remember the picture? I think it was dated from the Great Depression, I think, where you have a wheelbarrow with stashes with money on it. You know, paper money.
I think those are pictures from the Weimar inflationary period, but it was out of control. There was a whole wheelbarrow full of money to get a loaf of bread. The German people were actually burning the banknotes to warm their homes because that was less expensive than buying firewood. And they were even using it as wallpaper and also as toilet paper.
Okay, Lou, that was it. Thank you for taking my call.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to switch over here to David in Canada. David, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. You're doing a great job. I just got something quick for you here. I don't know if you heard it. I heard it on March 30th on Michael Savage doing a radio show at the 42-minute mark. He broke some news about Michelle Fields, that she was hired at Breitbart News 5 months before. But Breitbart News is partially funded to the tune of $10 million by Robert Mercer, a hedge fund manager.
Okay.
But his family also is a pro-Cruz super PAC donator. So they're involved in the whole thing.
That would not surprise me at all. And, of course, Michelle Fields, it's now come out. She has a reputation. She's screaming assault and everything. That's how she gets her attention. That's how she gets her face on the...
Right, but I got something else a little bit more. There's more smoke. Where there's smoke, there's fire. When Ted Cruz gave out his birth certificate, he gave it exclusively to Breitbart News. So Breitbart News is nothing but they're in with Cruz, the whole thing. But Cruz is he's like me. He's a Canadian, 100%. I know you know that. But what they failed to produce, they gave the birth certificate to Breitbart News, but they didn't give. It's called a CRBA form. Mm-hmm. His mother had to fill out a consular report of birth abroad for him to be naturalized. So he actually came into the U.S., back into the U.S. when he was 4 illegally.
Yeah, he was an illegal immigrant for the first 12 years he was here, his mother eventually did. His mother eventually did fill out that consular report in order to get Ted Cruz an American passport so he could go on a school-sponsored travel experience. But the reality is he was not born inside the United States of America, and he was not born a U.S. citizen, and he's not a U.S. citizen by birth because when he was born, his mother had renounced her U.S. citizenship to become a Canadian citizen. Because back when Ted Cruz was born, Canada did not recognize dual citizenship. You were either American or Canadian. You could not be both. And because Ted Cruz's mother's name shows up on Canadian voting rolls from that time, it was clear she was a Canadian citizen.
Now, how do you know that she did? They produce that CRBA form? Because I don't think nobody could find it.
I've heard it can't be found, but my understanding is that Ted Cruz became a citizen, a naturalized U.S. citizen, which is not the same thing as natural born.
Oh, wait, so you got that down pat. You understand all that.
Yeah, I've got that. I got a whole article on the meaning of natural born and the legal precedences and why the Founding Fathers put that in there. And it's all very explicit. And Ted Cruz's supporters and the GOP and the corporate media can look the other way and say, well, look, we've got all these legal scholars and this election commission, and they say natural born means any American citizen. Well, then why did they put that on there? Because it's not on the requirement. It's not on the requirement to be a member of Congress. It's a requirement only. May I complete?
Just like if Obama was born.
Okay, David. Thank you very much for the phone call. I would like to complete a coherent thought here. If natural born was supposed to mean any American citizen, they wouldn't have put it in the Constitution. It is there as a requirement only for the presidency. Members of Congress have to be U.S. citizens, but the natural born requirement isn't there. It clearly means something extra special for the presidency. And Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Jay, in his commentary about the creation of the Constitution, was saying the reason it was there was so that America's military might never be under the control of somebody not born inside the United States. Because remember, these were people who were very familiar with the history of Europe, through the Renaissance, and into modern times, about how countries in Europe were very often being ruled by people who hadn't been born there. In many cases, couldn't even speak the language. And it caused turmoil and war and conflict, and they did not want that for the United States of America. They wanted America for the American people. And that's why that requirement is there. And the legal definition for natural born existed in legal texts of the day, and that's what the Founding Fathers used. The United States was a brand new country. They didn't have legal precedents from within the United States, so they used accepted international law. Anyway, you can all turn a blind eye to that fact, but I guarantee you, if Ted Cruz winds up as the GOP nominee, Hillary Clinton's lawyers will file a lawsuit, and we will go into the November general election with just one name on the presidential ballot, and that's not democracy. That's not a republic. That's the sort of thing you see in dictatorships. Only one name. And we're having an election. There's only one name. It's an election. We've got democracy. No, we don't. Anyway, a lot of people, this is from PatriotRising.com, a lot of people are starting to say, why is the FBI so slow on this Clinton email probe? Now, I know everybody would love to see the FBI do their job. They'd love to see the Attorney General do their job. But I'm going to reiterate, and I've been saying this ever since the beginning of this whole FBI investigation. The FBI has been the protectors of the Clintons all along, going back a quarter of a century, going back all the way to the murder of White House Deputy Counsel Vincent Foster. Hillary can blackmail the FBI with that. And that's why I'm not expecting the FBI to do their job. We'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, if there's one thing that we know will always be true in Washington, D.C., the system will always protect itself. The law doesn't matter. The suffering doesn't matter. The system will protect itself. We saw that just a day ago when the Supreme Court refused to lift the seal on the D.C. Madam's client list, which her lawyer is insisting is pertinent to the 2016 elections. I don't know, maybe some of the Supreme Court justices are on that list. But the system will protect itself. And that's why I've never been confident that the FBI was officially going to find anything wrong with Hillary's email server. And Loretta Lynch is already out there saying, you know, even if the FBI finds something, it's up to me if we're going to indict. And I just don't think that treason and betrayal and espionage is all that important, but we're going to go after those global warming deniers with a big stick. So my nickel is wagered on Judicial Watch, which is in the middle of a civil lawsuit regarding the email system. And there's nothing that the FBI or the Department of Justice can do about that legally. And we see the system trying to narrow things down. I mean, the State Department just filed a petition with the court to limit the upcoming interviews of Hillary and her aides only to the creation of the email server itself, and everything else is off limits. Well, nobody cares about how the server was built. It's what was done with it that's the issue. But the system wants to protect itself. Because if I am right, and there was a spy operation going on in the U.S. Department of State under Hillary Clinton, that's a scandal that could bring down the entire government. And they all want to protect their phony baloney jobs. They all want to go on taking tax money from you while not paying it themselves. It's a sweet deal. They don't want to give that up. So I'm counting on Judicial Watch. Of course, they still have to go through the court system, and we know the court system is corrupt and protecting itself. And the proof of that has to do with a lawsuit that Larry Klayman brought against the Clinton Foundation. And he had built a very strong RICO lawsuit regarding all the sweet deals that the State Department was handing out to foreign governments that were making huge donations to the Clinton Charitable Foundation. Unfortunately, the case was brought before a Clinton-appointed judge who promptly threw the case out. And at that point, the FBI stepped in and said, we'll investigate this aspect. And so that, too, has vanished into the hidden recesses of the FBI. But politics is perception in an election year. And everything the government is doing to keep this story under wraps reeks of cover-up. And that's not going to sit well with the voters. We've had enough cover-ups. Now then. Speaking of cover-ups, remember the Hammond Ranch that was one of the pieces of land grabbed by the Bureau of Land Management, the BLM. And there's a big stink over there because the Bureau of Land Management has now leased the land on the Hammond Ranch to a Russian company and Clinton Foundation donors so that they can come in and mine uranium. Now, the Russian company could have come on in and leased that land from the Hammonds, but then the Hammonds would get the money, and that's just not allowed in the United States of America. The politicians have to have that money. Oh, and by the way, Harry Reid is now lobbying the White House to grab a big chunk of the Bundy land and declare it a national monument. So it will be safe from mining and oil drilling. And then, of course, there was that story a few weeks back where Obama's now saying, yeah, it's okay to drill for oil on this national monument we created to protect the land from oil drilling. It's amazing. Let's see. Trump is on the warpath, not just against Hillary Clinton and Ted Cruz. He's blasting U.S. continued support for NATO and Ukraine. And he's saying, do we really want to risk World War III for Ukraine? And, of course, nobody wants to risk World War III for Ukraine. They're risking World War III to keep the dollar the go-to currency for global trade and banking. That's what this is really all about. War between the U.S. paper dollar and the Russian ruble and the Chinese yuan and renminbi. Because the United States economy is a hollow shell. Our manufacturing has been allowed to decline in quantity and quality. Nobody wants our GMO agriculture. Even American food companies are now turning their backs on Monsanto. And the entire U.S. economic system is being propped up effectively by usury. And a big part of that usury are foreign nations that have to acquire U.S. dollars in order to conduct trade and banking across their borders and buy natural resources from those nations under U.S. puppet regimes who sell those resources only for the dollar. When that stops, when the world stops using the U.S. dollar, that's when the crash is really going to come. The Federal Reserve is not going to be able to create new dollars out of thin air fast enough to contain the damage. Now then, turning back to Wisconsin, something very funny. I was looking at the final results, and I was actually looking for something else. But I noticed something very strange, and we posted this to the front page of WhatReallyHappened.com. If you look at the Democratic primary, and you look at the percentages of the popular vote and the percentages of the delegates the candidates won, they pretty much line up. The delegates were apportioned according to how much of the popular vote Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton won. But then when you go over and look at the GOP side, there's something very weird, because even though Ted Cruz's margin over Donald Trump was about 12-13%, somehow Ted Cruz won 6 times as many delegates as Donald Trump. That makes no sense at all, unless somebody's playing fast and loose with those delegates again. Can you say crooked? I knew you could here. By the way, we published a flashback to a Fox News report in 2008 in which they acknowledged that those Diebold electronic voting machines were wide open to fraud. Now, Diebold itself is out of the election machine business, but there are a bunch of others in there. And again, if you go over to blackboxvoting.org, Bev Harris's wonderful website, you will see that all of these electronic machines are wide open to fraud and manipulation. This is how your nation was stolen from you, with these electronic voting machines that were mandated under the Bush administration. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to grab ourselves a quick phone call. Mo in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thanks for taking my call, Michael. I'll try to staying on topic today on the monetary system. And I don't know if I know you follow everything, it seems like, but when you look at the comments, some of these articles, like the Wall Street Journal article that came out on gold, some of these crazy articles comparing gold to, ridiculous, like they were saying people that hoard gold, that bought gold were anal retentive, you know.
Yeah. No, they're trying to smear gold. They're trying to link it with Osama bin Laden, even though that wasn't the real Osama in Abbottabad. No, they're trying to discourage Americans from buying gold because the Federal Reserve and J.P. Morgan need to buy all that they can at the lowest price they can, because they were playing fast and loose with other people's gold that was placed on deposit in their bullion vaults. And that's it. They want the gold. They don't want you to have gold. And if this doesn't work, and it doesn't look like it is because people are buying metal prudently, we'll see a repeat of what happened back in 1933. The government will say, you're not allowed to own investment gold or silver or anything. And that's going to happen exactly the same time they ban cash.
Oh, exactly right. You got this thing nailed. That negative interest rate stuff is coming here, baby. And, they don't want people. Sweden's almost going there. I think by 2020, they're going to be completely cashless. Just strictly, you can't even go on a bus or anything and pay cash anymore. They've basically gone cashless. I'm just going to ask this question because I don't want to hold up for other callers. But do you think, is it possible that these freaking psychos in charge have thought this thing out, like Russo said and everything, to where we're finally chipped? I mean, maybe they just know it's going cashless, and it's already a done deal.
All they're thinking about is keeping the money in the banks, avoiding bank runs, and they don't care how it harms other people. I mean, if you see a homeless and hungry person on the street in a cashless society, what are you going to do? Wave your plastic at them? And again, what are the politicians going to tuck into the G-strings of the strippers? I mean, they really haven't thought this thing all the way through.
Yeah, by the way, that's a very good one. I've used it on many people.
Anyway, over in Japan, they've been experimenting with negative interest rates, and now the Bank of Japan is having to print up all kinds of new currency because people are taking their money out of the savings accounts and taking it home with them. And
the bottom line to me, Michael, is they're actually trying to convince people. How stupid are you if you think paper and ink is better than something with intrinsic value? What?
Well, that's why they're out there, and they're trying to link people who own gold with, terrorism, and it's a relic. And really, what are you wasting your time with that stinky old smelly metal? We'll just take care of it for you. They're desperate. They're desperate to hold up this little Ponzi scheme, central banking scam, a little bit longer. It is, badly cracked. It's trembling at the foundations, and it's about to come down. And their answer to everything is take wealth from the people, take wealth from the people, take wealth from the people. Remember to file your taxes. You've got to pay taxes so that the rich don't have to.
Michael, you're doing a great job, because these sheeple they've actually got them convinced that paper and ink is more valuable than something that's been around for 5,000 years and is as a
well.
Special
Remember when the United States was started? Okay. The ink and paper wasn't the money. It was a claim check for the money. And so that in that paradigm, the ink and paper did have a remote value, as you were. It was basically to make it easier to carry around. But the ink and paper was never the money. The silver and gold was the money, and you could take that paper into any bank and get its value in silver and gold. With the Federal Reserve, they completely erased that. And they came out and say that piece of paper and ink is the money and has the value, which is a flat-out lie, because a Federal Reserve note is a unit of debt, not value. And while it's passing around from hand to hand, it's accruing more interest to those private central bankers.
Well, Michael, just one last thing. I mean, you're exactly right on 100%. I know you're like 1 year younger than me, but
you have my deepest sympathies, sir.
I'm a year older than you, so. But you remember the Hardy Boys? What was it? Gold doubloons and pieces of 8?
Yes.
Handed down by Applegate. Do you remember that?
I vaguely. I wasn't a big Hardy Boys fan.
It was like a Leave It to Beaver show for Hardy's Boys. I grew up watching that. I grew up also walking out in the country with my shotgun hunting pheasants.
Yes.
Just like I did up there in Maine. I mean, that's how I grew up. I bought my first shotgun when I was 10.
Yes.
Anyways, the bottom line is I'm just trying to say is that, it used to be, I grew up, gold and silver was like that. That was like the good, that was valuable. And now they're trying to degrade it. I mean, it just shows.
I mean, after they got rid of John F. Kennedy, the first thing they did was take all the silver out of the coins. I mean, back then, the quarter and the dime, and they were made out of silver. And there was nothing they could do to change its value. Now we've got these gas station game tokens we're supposed to think are money, and they manipulate the value all over the place to their own advantage. It's a gigantic scam. that private central bank is truly private. They don't care what happens to the country. They're in business to make themselves rich on the backs of ordinary people. That's what they're in business
Love you,
to do.
brother. Thank you.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over here to Will in Ohio. Will in Ohio, aloha. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I was just watching our local news outlet here, and they came across with this comment saying Donald Trump is had 7 out of 10 people have an unfavorable opinion of the front runner. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, now doesn't that within itself contradict itself? I mean, if he's the front runner, I'm thinking 6 out of 10 people are liking him.
Well, you know, the corporate media's motto, along with that of the U.S. government, is if at first you don't succeed, lie, lie again. But the lies are self-contradictory. As you point out, you can see the contradiction. And that's why this stuff isn't working. Plus the fact the American people are now very skeptical and distrusting of anything the government is saying or the corporate media.
Mm-hmm. Hey, did anybody point out after the last town hall meeting with Ted Cruz, when he got on some story about his mom or grandmother who was a computer programmer who specifically never learned how to type so that no man would ever tell her how to type? Now, what kind of computer programmer has not picked up typing along the way?
Yeah, that's a little bit out there. I missed that one. I'd love to find documentation on that one. I mean, that it tells us that Ted Cruz doesn't actually know anything about computers and computer programming, which wouldn't surprise me.
Exactly. It's amazing.
I'm sure he knows all about maple syrup, though.
Yeah, let's just keep pointing it out. I mean, that's all we can do is keep pointing it out.
If you can find anywhere that is actually documented, send it in. I got to post that one. That's an amazing, stupid thing for him to say. All right, thanks a lot. All right, we're going to let you go. Let's get on back here to the news here. Speaking of Ted Cruz, according to Radar, the National Enquirer is about to launch a new article on Ted Cruz's sex scandal, linking him with the D.C. Madam Deborah Jean Palfrey. I hope they're not doing it off that one page from her records because that's a misreading. But supposedly they have got other sources and they're going to be coming out with that. Now, Montgomery Sibley is, or was, Deborah Jean Palfrey's lawyer, and right now he's got apparently one more legal maneuver he can do to try and get the restraining order on the D.C. Madam's records lifted. And after that, he's going to have to make a decision whether he's going to leak them or not, because he will be in violation of a court order, and he's looking at jail time for that. And but again, the system is out to protect itself. Wow, we've got one more cover-up. Who do you think it's going to be? You know, Sibley is saying this has bearing on the current political season. So I don't think it's Donald Trump. I don't think it's Bernie Sanders. I don't think it's Hillary, but maybe, because she swings both ways. It has to be Ted Cruz. The original National Enquirer story said there was at least one prostitute in his stable of chicks. Now, Heidi is apparently in private saying she doesn't care. She's another Hillary. You know, her husband can do whatever. But Ted Cruz has campaigned on this platform of being a moral Christian. And so this is a big, big problem for him. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, getting on back to the campaign trail. Everybody's up in New York. They got the primaries coming up on the 19th. And they're all campaigning like crazy. And Hillary's trying to prove she can ride a subway without much success. And apparently jammed up traffic in Harlem by stopping for a $600 haircut at Bergdorf Goodman. Meanwhile, Ted Cruz was going to visit this high school in the Bronx, and apparently it provoked a huge reaction among the students who threatened a mass walkout of the campus, and Cruz was forced to cancel the visit. So it's getting intense out there. Now then, I have been predicting this based on Paul Ryan being in Israel with that congressional delegation, and he's making all these speeches and getting all this media attention, and he's kissing Netanyahu's gluteus maximi. And so now it appears we're getting some confirmation. This is out of the politicalinsider.com, where basically they're saying that Charles Koch is telling his friends that he is working to get Paul Ryan installed as the anointed GOP candidate at the convention. So that's what they're going to do. They're going to kick out Trump. They realize Cruz is vulnerable on that citizenship issue. And more than that, Cruz keeps opening his mouth and saying some very dumb things. He's running on this highly religious, moral person, and apparently he wants to ban certain musical notes because they're the tools of the devil. They're satanic. That's a little bit out there. Okay, we're going to go ahead and grab ourselves a phone call. Francis in Canada, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I got a couple things I'd like to talk about. One thing is I'd like to talk about the Breitbart article came out last night saying that Trump is going to fall short between 50 to 100 delegates because of his loss in Wisconsin. So he's not going to be able to walk in with a
He got robbed in Wisconsin. We're still getting, all kinds of reports of election fraud up there. I mean, that was stolen. This is the crookedest election in U.S. history.
Yeah. The other thing I want to talk about is Webster Tarpley. And I used to have a very high opinion of Webster. And in a certain sense, I still do. He's a very scholarly guy. He's one of the best educated people in the, the alternative press, I'd say. And but at the same time, he's turned full commie on this one during this election. And it's just sort of a lot of people are getting really turned off by, I'm almost suspicious that he's getting paid by MoveOn.org or something, with a party line. He's not even reasoning with people. He's just, flat out, Marxist-Leninist or something.
Well, maybe somebody's paying for the agenda, or there could be something else going on here. Capitalism in the United States has failed. Okay, at heart, I'm a capitalist. I wish we could go back to a working capitalist economy. It's gone. And that leaves us with one of two choices, fascism or socialism. And if I'm forced to make a choice between the two of them, I'm going to go with socialism, because that at least is making tacit acknowledgement of the needs of the common population, whereas fascism is all about sucking wealth out of the people and giving it to the money junkies. So take your pick.
Well, I'm just really feeling bad right now because Donald doesn't look like he's going to make it, and it looks like they're going to rob him at the convention unless, I don't know, what do you think of this big, it looks like Alex Jones and that, what's his name, that Stone character, they're calling for 5 million people to descend on Cleveland. What do you think of all that? Is that going to do any good, or are you just going to be a bunch of people getting beat up and arrested?
It's probably going to be the latter, because, the police are already buying all this riot gear. They're expecting this to be the most violent convention since the Democratic Convention back in 1960. I forget which year it was. Yeah, it's going to be very, very ugly indeed, because the Republican voters are feeling very cheated about this. And
it's not going to be the lefties that are going to get beaten up. It's going to be the right-wingers.
Well, it's always the people who are defying the current ruling class who get beat up. We don't need to call them lefties or righties. It's the haves beating up on the have-nots.
Well.
Okay?
Thanks a lot, Mike.
All right, we're going to let you go here. Now, there's an interesting development. There's a story over at Rumor Mill News where they're saying that, at this point, Trump doesn't look like he's going to get enough delegates to secure a first ballot victory at the convention. They stole Wisconsin from him, and as I pointed out, even the delegate count is rigged. He should have gotten more delegates. Cruz got 6 times as many delegates as Donald Trump, although only leading him 13% in the popular vote. This thing is crooked from top to bottom. So what are Trump's options? And apparently Donald Trump is having conversations with the ex-governor of New Mexico, Gary Johnson, who is looking like he's going to be nominated by the Libertarian Party. We actually do have a third party out there that's survived for quite a few years, and you never hear about them. But they're talking about if Donald Trump feels he's being ejected by the GOP, and he is, he might just move on over to the Libertarian Party. And that would be a very smart move, because the Libertarian Party is already got the developed infrastructure for a third-party campaign. They've already got the petitions to be on the ballots in the 50 nations. Trump joining the Libertarian Party would immediately give all the disaffected Republican voters and the disaffected Democratic voters someplace they can go to express their displeasure with the party leadership. That could bring so many people into the Libertarian Party, it would actually rival the two traditional corrupt parties. That would be a good shakeup. I'd like to see that happen. So, this is going to be a very interesting year. And remember, when this country was started, there was no rule that said there are only two parties. The two-party system was created to save the corruptors of government money because they only have to bribe two candidates to bypass the will of the voters. Instead of the old system where they had to bribe 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, and that's just money frittered out the window. We'll narrow it down to just two parties so we won't look like we're the Soviet Union with just one party. But we'll cut costs. We only have to bribe two candidates to tell the voters to go jump in a lake. Okay, let's see. Moving on here. Florida Governor Rick Scott got a good talking to. He was apparently at a Starbucks, and a woman just stood up and read him the riot act over the anti-abortion bill, cuts to Medicaid, and Scott was so humiliated by this, he basically left the Starbucks without getting his latte. And good for this woman. More Americans need to show that kind of courage and get in the face of these politicians and say, you are not doing the job that you promised you would do for us. It's time to get angry. And if you, like Stanley Milgram's patience, you need an authority figure to tell you it's okay to get angry, I'm that authority figure. Yes, it's okay for you to be angry. To heck with anger management. We're all ticked off, and it's time to let it be known. I'm mad as heck, and I'm not going to take it anymore. Now, meanwhile, over in the court system, lawyers for the former U.S. House Speaker Dennis Hastert, who was convicted last year of financial crimes in trying to hide the fact that he was paying blackmail money over some earlier indiscretions, the lawyers are asking for probation only because Hastert is really, really sorry for what he did. You know, he's suffered so much, we should let him out. All right, turning to the war zones, and I realize I'm running late on the talking points, so I'm going to be blowing through a lot of these really, really fast. And I'm going to ask callers to be as brief as they possibly can so that we can get to the end of this stuff here. Ashton Carter is out there saying China far and away the most aggressive nation in Asia. This according to Sputnik News. Then he turns around and says Russia is the #1 strategic threat. They are desperate to get this new world war going because they think it's going to save the economy. And no, it won't. We're going to lose this one. We'll be back after commercials and news break. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open. I'm going to get to the call who's waiting right now here. But somebody did send me the video of Ted Cruz making this comment about his mother being a computer programmer but never learning how to type so that no man would tell her that she had to type something up for him. Actually, I'm the best typist I know. But even in the days of those cardboard punch cards, you needed to know how to type. All right, let's grab ourselves a phone call here. Randy in Indiana. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello there. Well, I'll tell you, your statement about socialism, capitalism, fascism is very interesting. But anybody that's honest, if they started with a clean slate and their theories of how society or economy would be run, would choose capitalism. A clean slate, you're going to go the individual and profit motive, and you're going to take advantage of it because in so many ways...
I agree with you.
Right.
I agree with you. But if we are not allowed to be a capitalist society, you know, we have a choice of descending into fascism or swinging the other way and go to socialism.
And the way I say, and the proof of that swing towards socialism, the inherent, because humans are born both individualistic and collective. The proof of the socialism is if you get in a plane crash in the wilderness and you got 10 people, they don't all head off in their own direction. For survival, they get together. Even if there's a Navy SEAL that could go off in his own direction, he stays and helps the other 9. So there's a collective that is undeniable, and a plane crash in the wilderness also proves that. So here's the thing. My point is this, and people, we have been plane crashed. we've been crashed. So what I'm saying is, I hate to say it, but we are either going to use socialism / the government, or socialism / the government will be used against us, Michael. That's all I wanted to say.
All right. Well, listen, thank you very much for that interesting insight here, and we're going to let you go. And I'm going to go ahead and close the phone lines because I got a bunch of stuff I need to get through, and we've only got 1 hour left. So thank you all very much for understanding. I need to get back to the news here. Now, getting over to the war zones, you remember that big stink over all those antiquities in Syria that ISIS was dynamiting and bombing, and now that they've kicked ISIS out of those areas, they've gone back in and discovered that there's actually very little damage, and they figure it can all be rebuilt in about 5 years, which would be good. I mean, these are UNESCO World Heritage Sites. What they have discovered, though, is that small antiquities that can be picked up and carried have been looted, and apparently the trail of the looted Syrian antiquities, like the looted oil, goes into Turkey, and in particular a city, Gaziantep. And that's the trade hub used by ISIS to sell these objects of cultural heritage that are stolen from not only Syria, but also in Iraq. So, interestingly enough, over in Austria, their top military figures just had a meeting in Moscow. And basically the reason he had the meeting is because so many people in the European Union and the United States were saying, no, don't talk to Russia. You don't want to talk to Russia. And Austria seems to be realizing that Russia is probably a better relationship to be in than the European Union or the United States. That was certainly what was going on in Ukraine prior to the coup d'etat. So we may see a color revolution in Austria now. A coup in Vienna. We've got to make sure that they stay slaves to those private central banks. You're not allowed to escape the plantation and go off and actually work and have a decent life for yourself. That's not the New World Order's idea here. They just want a global population of blended together workers. Remember we were reporting yesterday? Sarkozy is out there saying that the European Union, in order to deal with the refugee crisis, don't send the refugees home, mandate interbreeding. That's where they're going with this thing. The Pentagon has announced that they're getting ready to open more military bases in Iraq. Looks like we're well and truly back into Iraq for 4th or 5th time. I've lost count. They keep having to go back in there because the gosh darn conquered Iraqis won't stay conquered. Muqtada al-Sadr is out there saying that Iraq should be for the Iraqi people. Where does he get these silly ideas? I mean, really? Got to get with the program. You know, it's all under the control of the United States, and the United States is under the control of Israel, and that's the way the world is supposed to be. Meanwhile, the U.S. has approved roughly $386 million worth of bombs to be sold to Australia. Not sure who Australia thinks they're going to use them on. The Aborigines? The sharks, but that's a deal going on. War is good business for those defense contractors. Over in the U.S. Congress, 2 Republican senators who opposed the nuclear agreement with Iran, because Israel told them to oppose it, are putting forward a bill that would literally make it illegal for Iran to use the U.S. dollar. And Iran's response is probably going to be, that's okay, the dollar isn't what it used to be, so we don't care. Now, speaking of Europe, Francois Hollande is saying Paris and Berlin must take the fight to the terrorists outside Europe. So Hollande is out there hopping on this board that the war on terror means we can attack anybody, anywhere, anytime. And you shouldn't complain about it because it's a war on terror. Just like when the United States was bombing Syria into rubble, claiming they were fighting ISIS and Al-Qaeda, but always seeming to miss them and hit Syria instead. I would recommend to Hollande that his first 2 attacks be Central Intelligence Agency and the Mossad, and that will end about 90% of the world's terror problem right there. Now, Germany is launching a criminal probe into one of their comedians for reciting a poem about Turkish President Erdogan, which was less than flattering. And Merkel called the piece deliberately insulting. And apparently in Germany, they actually have a law saying that you cannot say anything negative about a head of state anywhere in the world, no matter how badly they are acting. Now, here's what's going on. The central bank's handling of the gold shortages showed the world the central banks are all one gang looking out for themselves at the expense of the world's people. The Panama Papers showed the world that all of their leaders do not pay taxes, again at the expense of the world's people. And Merkel has just shown the world that all the world's leaders are just one criminal gang more interested in protecting each other from the rising wrath of the world's people than in protecting the people's rights. And this law in Germany is being selectively enforced because there are these wonderful floats in German parades that are very insulting to world's leaders. And these people have never been prosecuted. And we have pictures of them on this article on the front page of WhatReallyHappened.com. But this comedian has insulted our ally Erdogan, and he will be going to jail. Now, the Panama Papers are provoking political crises all over the world because of the scale of it. It's not just one or two or this guy or that celebrity. It's how many are involved in this scam. All of these governments create these legal tax loopholes, and then, of course, they go ahead and use them. Now, even the Rothschild banks are coming on out and saying America has now become the world's biggest tax haven. The U.S. wasn't interested in finding tax dodgers. They wanted to shut down Switzerland as a tax haven. Now they're shutting down Panama as a tax haven. They're grabbing this lucrative source of revenue for themselves. David Cameron is under attack right now because of the obvious hypocrisy of his situation. He's being accused of completely undermining Tory party claims that they're tough on tax dodgers. Now, David Cameron was out there saying, back in 2012, in the Jimmy Carr situation, Cameron was saying avoiding tax is not morally acceptable. However, earlier today, Cameron had a little news conference in which he admitted he did, in fact, have a stake in his father's offshore trust. It's like when Bill Clinton denied having sex with Monica Lewinsky, and then he had to come out and say, well, yeah, I did. You caught me. Aren't I something? We'll be right back after these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, David Cameron is under fire not only for the Panama Papers and finally having to admit that, yes, it's part of the Cameron family fortune. He's out there saying that, actually, we sold it all a while back. We didn't get very much money for it, and, And anybody who takes him at his word right now is just being a fool. Cameron is also under fire because apparently he has spent over £10 million to fund a mailer to every British home, trying to scare them out of the Brexit. The polls are showing the British people want out of the European Union. The referendum's coming up this summer, and they're just out there scaremongering about, it'll be terrible if we break. Great Britain is historically this weak, tiny little country that's just so helpless, and we have to stay in the European Union. Now, up in the Netherlands, the Dutch are out there saying to the British, you better go ahead and get out while you can. Now, as you know, the Dutch voters overwhelmingly rejected the European Union deal to bring Ukraine in, which was the whole reason for the U.S. coup d'etat in Kiev. And they're already being told by Poroshenko and by their own politicians that, well, we have a sense of what the people want, but really this is up for the politicians to decide. They're getting the same fascist dictatorship treatment we're getting here with our party leadership. Well, we know you want Donald Trump, and we know what's best, and we'll decide what's going to go on. So as a result of that, the Dutch are sending messages to Great Britain, if you have a chance to get out, you better get out now, because the European Union leadership is clearly aiming at a trans-union dictatorship where the member states will have no power whatsoever. They've been talking about federalization of a single united European Union and all of its member nations reduced to the level of a state here in this country, like New Jersey. No power, no authority, no autonomy. You will just do what we tell you to do. Here in the United States, as you know, we did not have exactly a happy ending to our stock market today. I'm sure they'll fix that for Friday, because they always do. But the U.S. economy is bracing for the worst earnings season since 2009. Retail is down. People are closing. And they've just downgraded all the earlier reports that were glowing again. The labor market is now even officially being admitted as bad as it was back in 2009. There's been no recovery. We are just as bad off right now as we were in the immediate aftermath of the collapse of the mortgage-backed security fraud. Interesting article coming out of Daily Bail, Eric Holder's Legacy, The Divine Right of Criminal Bankers. And it's going over his record of not prosecuting any of these people on Wall Street who were behind this fraud. They were untouchable. And Frontline has come out with a show about this, The Untouchables, and shows how this was just a license. It was like that Monopoly get-out-of-jail-free card. And Eric Holder was just handing them out all over Wall Street in Washington, D.C. And unfortunately, as it turns out, it's not just the United States, because apparently, while everybody is looking at the departure of Iceland's prime minister over his own tax avoidance scandal, their legislature just changed the banking laws to have much shorter sentences, which means 3 of the bankers who wrecked Iceland's economy are going to be let out of jail. They've suffered enough, really, and they meant well. No, they didn't. They're crooks. They're all crooks, and the crooks are in control of the government. And that's why things are the way they are. U.S. Steel is going to lay off 25% of its salaried workers. There's weak demand for steel. People aren't building cars. They're not building appliances. They're not building buildings. The demand isn't there, and because the demand is down, the price is down, and they're in trouble. 3 more companies are issuing major layoffs. Schlumberger, because of the oil price decline, they're getting ready to cut 26% of their workforce, and that is a lot of people. Hewlett-Packard, which has already gone through 2 major workforce reductions, 24,600 back in 2011, 29,000 more in 2012, and now 30,000 last year. And they're talking about they're going to have to cut again this year because the PC market and the printer market are in decline. And the reason for that is most of the people buying Hewlett-Packard printers and Hewlett-Packard computers, or any computer for that matter, were people running home businesses. And those small businesses have been wiped out in the economy. It's the same reason these office supply stores are in trouble, where Office Depot and Office Max, I guess, is the other one. They just had to merge and cut their workforce. Boeing is going to be cutting 4,000 jobs by June, trying to raise their earnings and look good for the stockholders. Fitch is issuing a warning about home prices in Texas. They've been having a bubble down there. Real estate pros are saying there's going to be a downturn. You'd better get ready for it right now. And the biggest shock of all, Puerto Rico has suspended all payments on its $72 billion public debt, most of which is owed to U.S. financial institutions. And they already had on Fox News, Congress is moving for a bailout for Puerto Rico. What does that mean? It means they're going to take more of your money and give it to Puerto Rico so Puerto Rico can give it to Wall Street. That's all a bailout has ever been, taking money from the people and giving it to the banks so the banks can then loan it back to the people at interest. That's what a bailout is. China has issued a warning to George Soros. Don't go to war against our currency. They know what all these wars and conflicts are really all about, and they know who's driving it. Now, even though they're officially denying any involvement in the Panama Papers, which is not true, the Chinese ruling family's already been caught in this thing. China is now censoring the Panama Papers. They have issued orders to all their media and all their internet companies. This is to be blocked. It's not to be allowed in. Everybody is running scared on this one. Now, Craig Murray is out there over in an article on craigmurray.org saying we shouldn't be relying on corporate media institutions to filter the Panama Papers. It's time for a full release of the raw data. Let the people go on in and find out for themselves. It'll be a massive crowdsourced analysis of this huge volume of data. And yeah, we need the raw data. No more filtering by government, no more filtering by the establishment media. We want to see the raw data for ourselves. And we should apply that not only to the Panama Papers, but to everything, including global warming. Show us the raw temperature data before you have adjusted and corrected and statistically streamlined it, all of which is a cover for cooking the books. Global bond yields fell to a record low 1.3%, another indicator things are headed down. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and I've got so much more to get through here, but I'm going to skip on down, and let's get the global warming news out of the way, because I do enjoy it so much here. Up in British Columbia, the ski resorts there were very worried because of all this El Nino warmth that was flowing up against the west coast of the Americas, and they were concerned that it was going to harm their ski season. Now, as we already documented before, the El Nino current has nothing to do with human activity. It's caused by undersea volcanoes. There's a huge number of them in the Western Pacific, and there's nobody actually down there counting which ones are active and are erupting. But that's the source of that point source of heat that becomes the El Nino current. Well, fortunately for the ski resort operators in British Columbia, this lingering winter has resulted that they've had remarkable seasons. And the El Nino didn't harm them. They're doing really good. They've had lots and lots of snow. They've still got snow here. Interesting article coming out of turnto10.com. Spring snow negatively impacts high school sports. Now, this would be the time of year when the high school athletes should be going out and practicing for baseball and football and basketball in the outdoor practice areas. And they're still dealing with snow. They're saying it's very frustrating. Yeah, Al Gore told us this was all going away here. It's snowing again briefly in the Durham region. Lansing, Michigan, they're expecting snow tomorrow. It's just insane. Remember back in 2000, snowfalls are now a thing of the past. You know, at some point, you're going to have to just have that moment of revelation where you actually understand and comprehend deep in your soul, yeah, the government and the media are lying to us about everything. Everything. Now, an interesting article just came on out. We've been talking about how the government is lying about the unemployment rate. They're lying about the state of the economy. The one group that's supposed to be keeping an eye on what the government is really doing is the Government Accountability Office, which is the nonpartisan auditor and investigator for Congress. And the GAO has just come on out saying the U.S. government's current records are being so poorly kept, it can't audit them. And the GAO provided a report to Congress yesterday basically saying that federal paperwork is so sloppy, record keeping is so sloppy, that they can't substantiate much of what the government is saying. Yeah, we understand that. When it's all lies, you don't leave a record that proves it can be lies. Now, getting on to the immigration situation. Remember that big, ugly incident in Cologne, Germany on New Year's Eve, the mass sexual assaults? Well, it's now come on out. Cologne's Express newspaper is reporting that the Interior Ministry of North Rhine-Westphalia pressured a senior police officer to delete rape from their official report of what happened on January 1st. They were told by the government, don't mention rape. We're trying to sell everybody that this immigration flood is a good thing and you're just getting in the way of the New World Order. Meanwhile, the first Syrians are arriving in the United States under the Surge Resettlement Program. They're trying to basically hit the gas pedal on this and get as much done before public opinion reaches the point of saying, time to stop. Meanwhile, the Obama administration is claiming they have the authority to declare illegal immigrants eligible for Social Security and disability. Now, these illegal immigrants haven't paid into Social Security or the Disability Insurance Fund. You have. But Obama is out there saying, we're going to take the money that was supposed to be there for the Americans, and I have the authority to give it to the illegal immigrants. No, he doesn't, actually. Congress has to make that call. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the USS Liberty. We mentioned not too long ago that there was a billboard put up in Massachusetts to honor and remember the veterans of the USS Liberty and to basically help them seek some kind of justice for the grievous injury done to them, not just by Israel, but by our own government. And apparently, Israel's minions in the United States called and complained and complained and complained, and the billboard company basically yielded to them and took the billboard down. We're not allowed to put up billboards that Israel doesn't like. This is the United States of America, and Israel always tells us what we can and cannot show you. So they took the billboard down 2 weeks early, and they're not answering any phone calls as to why they did it. Now, the billboard, although it was denounced as anti-Semitic and conspiracy theory, all it simply said were the absolute facts. Israel attacked the USS Liberty, and the veterans are still alive today, and they just want their story to be told. And there is no question that Israel attacked the USS Liberty. It's just Israel wants the story to go away. I mean, Israel's real big about constantly wagging Nazis and Hitler and Germany and just keeping it in front of our eyes, but they don't want their own malfeasances to go away, to be remembered. They want it to go away. You don't remember that part. Now, the billboard did not take a position on whether the attack was deliberate or, as Israel claims, it was a result of very poor weather and lousy eyesight by all the various pilots and seamen who attacked the ship, all of which we already know was a complete lie. It just said, Israel attacked the USS Liberty. That's a fact. And the billboard was denounced as conspiracy theory and anti-Semitism. And this billboard company knuckled under. Amazing. Okay, over in Philadelphia, the former commander of the Philadelphia Police Department's Firearms Identification Unit died just 1 day before he was scheduled to be questioned by prosecutors about thefts from the department. Guns had gone missing. Nobody knew where. He was going to be questioned by prosecutors, but golly gee whiz, he got really, really depressed, and he just committed suicide just the day before. Honest, it's an apparent suicide. And if you believe that one, I have some of Saddam's nuclear weapons to sell you. Now, here's where it's getting really weird. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has issued a travel ban to 6 states in the United States of America over the fact that they have gun laws that are not as strict as New York's. And this is not a travel ban on New York City workers or anybody in the government. Cuomo is out there telling the people of New York, you shouldn't go to these states. Now, he doesn't have the authority to ban New Yorkers' travel to any states. New Yorkers love to go to Florida, especially in the winter, and that's on Cuomo's banned list. The others are Texas, Idaho, Arizona, Utah, and Vermont. And apparently that list is going to grow. Cuomo is literally out there thinking he has got some kind of authority to tell the people of New York City, or people of New York State, where they can go and where they can't. I am sure that the people of New York are going to tell him otherwise here. Over in Portland Community College, there's a history professor, James Harrison, who was out there saying that it's time for whiteness to be abolished during a talk he gave to the university's Whiteness History Month program. Can you imagine the fury if somebody said blackness should be abolished? But all of a sudden, white people are fair game. Over in the European Union, they say, Europe cannot be white much longer. It must be diversified. And the longer you're in the European Union, diverse it's going to get. We've got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, remember when the U.S. government was trying to sell you that we needed to invade Syria because Bashar al-Assad was using poison gas on his own people? And the story didn't get a lot of traction for the very simple reason that nobody could actually come up with a motive why Assad would use poison gas on his own Alawite supporters right in front of UN chemical weapons inspectors on the very day they arrived in Syria. That was the part that should have been there and wasn't, a motive. Well, Russia Today is reporting on multiple stories that, in fact, chemical weapons are being used in Aleppo, and not too surprisingly, they're being used by the U.S.-backed terrorist groups. And they are killing civilians. But it's okay for them to do it. It's only bad when Assad is accused of doing it. And by the way, even the UN came out and said, no, there wasn't any evidence that Assad had done any of these things. It's just another big lie like Saddam's nuclear weapons to trick you into war. At some point, if you listen to this show long enough, if you read my website, if you go out and do your own research, which is even better, you're going to have that epiphany where you're going to realize down at the bottom of your soul, yes, the government and the establishment media are lying to us about everything. We are the most lied to people on the face of the earth. I think one of the reasons for the success of the Matrix movie franchise was people understood at some level that it was a metaphor for our current life, that we don't really see the real world because there's this complex simulation that's playing in front of us all the time. But the cracks are definitely showing. Now then, attorneys with the Council of American Islamic Relations have filed a legal complaint in Virginia against the director of the Terrorist Screening Center, Christopher Pihota, and other government officials, basically saying they throw people on the terrorist watch list for ridiculous reasons, guesses, hunches, conjectures, national origin, just somebody annoyed a TSA agent and they get a name, yeah, it goes on the terrorist watch list. And they're hammering home the point by pointing out over in Alameda County, there's somebody who's on the U.S. terrorist watch list. It's a 4-year-old American boy living in Alameda County, and he's been on the terrorist watch list most of his life. Why? The terrorist watch list isn't about terrorists. It's a tool to punish those who do not go along with the government's agenda. Most of the people on there shouldn't be there. They've even had some embarrassing moments. They caught a U.S. congressman at one point. And I'm sure he got his name off the list. But if you are on that list, there's no actual official way to get your name off. They don't have to provide any proof that you're a terrorist, just that they want to watch you. And it causes all kinds of problems when you travel. It's a tool of terror. Don't speak out against TSA. Don't question. You might be on the terrorist watch list. And that will follow you for the rest of your life. Oh, boy. Anyway, let's see. Story coming out of Washington Post, no less. Parents call 911 to help suicidal daughter, and the police ended up shooting her. Now, there was this daughter. She was talking about suicide. She got in the car and drove off. And they called the police and said, our daughter is out there on the road. Here's the license number. She's suicidal. We need to make sure she's okay. And the police ended up shooting her, claiming that she attacked them, which is the catch-all excuse. Right now, the reality is, go ahead and call 911 for the fire department or an ambulance. But if you call 911 and ask for the police, you are actually in greater danger than dealing with whatever crisis you're dealing with yourself. That's becoming a trend and a pattern all across the country. Now, over in San Antonio, Texas, there's been a video that came out. There was a school police officer. Schools now have their own police forces. San Antonio, Texas, was caught on video slamming a 12-year-old girl onto the ground. What are we raising this next generation of Americans to do and to be with that kind of treatment? Now, you remember this big stink over the iPhone? The FBI was suing Apple for a new software tool that would allow them to break into any iPhone they wanted to. And then they dropped the lawsuit and they said they got into the phone using a company in Israel, and now Apple wants to know how they did it. And back at the time I said, I think the FBI is dropping the lawsuit against Apple because it's a PR nightmare. And I reminded everybody the iPhone under discussion was not actually the property of either of the two named patsies. It was a work-provided cell phone, which meant that even if there was something nefarious going on, which I don't think, I think these two were set up, there wouldn't be anything about it on the phone. And how embarrassing it was going to be for the FBI after all this screaming about, we need to get into this phone, if there wasn't anything. So now we have this story over at cultofmac.com. According to a senior FBI official, they're saying it's too early to tell if this iPhone contains useful evidence. It's too early. It's taking a long time to analyze all the data on the iPhone. Look, there isn't that much memory on an iPhone. It doesn't take that long to go through it. There's nothing on the iPhone. It was all a big stink to try and push the agenda of absolute open access to all of our electronic devices, or to convince us that's what they're doing. After that comment that Obama made the other day about how it's impossible to track money being sent by illegal immigrants in the U.S. back to Mexico, to me, that's admitting that this whole NSA, we're spying on all of you, was a gigantic bluff. And you don't really have a reason to be afraid of them. I'm sure that certain individuals, such as myself, are probably being surveilled specifically. But they simply can't keep watch on 300 million Americans 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, on all of the devices that you're using. It's simply impossible. And it's counterproductive. Because the vast majority of you Americans, you're trying to comply with the law. You're trying to obey all the huge number of laws that are out there, which are there so that they can fine you when you break a law you probably didn't know about. But they can't watch all of you. And so you shouldn't be afraid to talk with your coworkers and your family and your friends and your relatives about what's going on in this country. Because remember, the Nazis played this same dirty trick on the German people. They crafted this illusion of a Gestapo that could hear everything, see everything, knew everything was going on, could almost read your mind, to scare the German people into silent acceptance of what was happening to their country. And look what happened to Germany. So I'm starting to think this whole NSA, we're spying on all of you, is a gigantic bluff. I mean, there are very real computer reasons why it's impossible for them to be doing that. But they want to scare you into silence. And if you allow yourself to be afraid, they have won. You do have a constitutional right to freedom of speech. And that right is there to allow you to criticize the wrong actions of the government. Apparently, the Trump hotels have been attacked by hackers again. They really do not like him. Do not like him at all. Now, if you're living near the DuPont factory in Dordrecht, which is over in the Netherlands, you may be in a little bit of trouble because they're doing blood tests of all the people living around this plant and discovering that they've got high concentrations of a chemical called C8 at dangerous levels. C8 used to be used in the processing of Teflon. It's been banned, but it looks like the damage has been done. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Genesis Communication Network. The lovely Lady Claire will be joining us. So stay safe, stay skeptical, stay informed, make good choices, and aloha America.